Team House with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
And you had this story about Christmas. This was about 2009. I was wondering if you could kind of lead us into that story and tell us what happened.
Okay, so a couple wars are on, so I'm pretty thick and heavy. You go, you fight in Afghanistan for 4 months, you come back home for a little bit, you train for 4 months, then you deploy to other parts of the world for 4 months, you come back, you train for a little bit, and then you go back to Afghanistan. So at the end of the day, you're spending about somewhere between 270, 300 days gone from your house out of the year. You kind of start doing that year after year after year. In that particular instance, AQAP was starting to become a viable threat. They were starting to really get some sophisticated ways to bring down international jets with some of the ways they were going about making explosives. And it was really starting to become, like I said, a viable threat. So the Obama administration was like, okay, we need to put some counterterrorism efforts here into Yemen. And so we were kind of doing that on the back burner while the main efforts were Iraq and Afghanistan. But every other 4 months you weren't either there, you were centered on Yemen and Somalia with AQAP and AQ East Africa, or Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, or Al Qaeda in East Africa. And so right about Christmas of 2009, 2010 timeframe, we were hunting primarily a guy named Anwar Laki, who ironically was an American citizen. Right at 9/11, had come out against the Muslim actions, but then swung to the other side of the spectrum over time and was now in Yemen, doing his best to bring about attacks to the international community that I define as, Europe and the United States. So we're kind of hunting them down, and as you start doing this, you kind of start seeing the Al Qaeda fingerprint. You start seeing the training camps. You start seeing the recruitment. You start seeing increased threat levels. You start hearing the international chatter about attacks pending this here, and so out of one of those training camps, some suicide bombers came at the American embassy, and we did everything we could to have the locals handle it, but at the end of the day, we weren't able to get them where they needed to be, whether it was the Yemeni military, the Yemeni police, or other. And so now it ends up being an emergency action committee, more or less, to the White House level, with a couple key leaders along the chain of command, going up, into the principals committee, which is, the head of the Secretary of State, the head of the agency, the lead military guy, which is CENTCOM commander at the time, which was Dave Petraeus. And at the end of the day, we come down to hey, either we take care of this problem now with a couple of Harriers off of an amphib, so some Marine jets with some 500-pound bombs, or we try to defend ourselves at the gates of the embassy tomorrow morning. I don't know if we're going to be successful against multiple suicide bombers coming into the embassy. So, at the end of the day, they're, as a first time as a mere lieutenant commander in the Navy, talking into the principals committee on an emergency action decision brief, and articulating in 3 minutes or less the need to not only take care of the suicide bombers, but hey, we've been watching this training camp of 100 plus terrorists, and this is where these guys came from. And if we don't take care of this problem and this other one is just going to continue to launch more people at us over time. So anyway, decision came down, even with all the lawyers involved, to take them both. And so, okay, let's take care of both of these problems at the same time. So we did, through a combination of ship launched munitions and jets and bombs. And so we took care of the suicide bombers that were going to come in on the embassy, and we also took care of this training camp. So we're like, okay, but what that did was that decimated a rank of AQAP. So now the senior leaders in AQAP that we'd been really trying to get after, they had to start coming up on the net to reorganize. Mm-hmm. So that made them more targetable. So then another target starts to develop, and sure enough, it's a bunch of guys that are starting to congregate in the mountains and starting to kind of come together. And then we start to see some of the high value signature pieces, guys dressed in white, getting shown deference, leading like sermons, planning meetings type things. And so, we tee up another strike for decision pretty much at the presidential level. And this is Christmas Eve. And the approval comes like, hey, like, do it. So we also kind of take care of that problem, start taking more chess pieces off the chessboard. And we're like, hey, we're good. Team America, we're bringing it. Steel on target, right? Taking care of threats to the international community. Go to bed that night, wake up in the morning, and there's reports about this kid on a passenger jet over Detroit that's trying to light his underwear on fire or explode his underwear. Mm-hmm. And instead of exploding his underwear, they just light him on fire and he burns horribly around the crotch area. Good for him. It's like, man, like, where did that come from? Was that Al-Qaeda in East Africa? Was that Al-Qaeda out of Pakistan? Was that Al-Qaeda in Yemen? Like, where did that come from? Because now this is the level that you're involved in. And turns out that one of the primary guys we were after had designed that entire explosive package for that kid to wear. And then they knew that the scrutiny coming out of Yemen was going to be fairly severe. So they sent him down into Africa. And then he came out of Northern Africa, Tunisia, on a flight to Detroit. And the only thing that saved the people on that plane and the people in that plane's flight path that would have been killed in their house on Christmas morning as this 747 plows into the outskirts of Detroit was that he had the underwear on for 3 days and he sweated just enough to change the chemical composition for it to go low order instead of high order. So it lit him on fire instead of exploded. And he had a seat right over the wing where all the fuel was. Mm-hmm. And we had no idea about it.
Which is kind of scary because he had been on the radar of British intelligence. He right. wasn't somebody who hadn't been under watch before. He didn't have a criminal past, but people were aware of him.
Yeah. So that taken in collective, it was, the writing was on the wall.
Mm-hmm. But JSOC didn't know this was a plot. You guys It was like purely coincidental that you nuked these guys from orbit, not knowing a plot was being hatched.
1,000%.
Yeah.
The entire intelligence community, whether it's Brit, American, other Five Eye, anybody, nobody had any idea about it.
Right.
So to me, the writing was on the wall. Hey, professional people either dedicate themselves as hard as the enemy is, or we lose. And so, I was kind of on a trajectory to get out of the Navy. I felt like I'd done more than my part, and I wanted to get home around my family and the things that I had, kind of cherished. And, but I was like, no way. Mm-mm. I'm like, if smart people that understand this problem set don't stay here and commit themselves to it, I'm like, we lose.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came back home. I kind of laid it out to my wife, the timeline as far as our kids' ages and, Navy life and da-da-da-da. But I was like, we're in this. And, to her credit, like, as soon as she kind of understood it, she was like, yeah, we're in this. Let's stay.
You told me
So